Every zombie apocalypse you've ever seen started the same way, not with millions of undead flooding the streets, not with governments falling or cities burning. It started with one room, one mistake, one door that should have stayed shut. Today we're breaking down all 7 levels of zombie outbreaks, from a single contaminated lab all the way to the extinction of the human species. And it all begins with something terrifyingly small. Level 1, Isolated Outbreak. Every apocalypse you've ever seen in a movie started in one room, one mistake, one door that should have stayed closed. And that's what makes Level 1 so terrifying, because on paper, it looks like nothing. A bad Tuesday, a contained incident. The infection is locked inside a single building, lab, or facility, and the rest of the world keeps spinning like nothing happened. People are going to work, kids are going to school. Nobody has any idea that civilization is balanced on a razor's edge. And the thing is, at Level 1, containment is still genuinely possible. We're not talking about grand military strategies or nuclear options. We're talking about doors, locks, one security guard doing his job correctly. The margin between minor biohazard cleanup and the end of the human race is measured in seconds and meters, which is, not ideal. The textbook example of a Level 1 outbreak is the 2007 Spanish horror film Rec. The entire infection is sealed inside a single Barcelona apartment building. A television reporter and her cameraman follow a fire crew responding to a routine emergency call, and within minutes, they're locked inside with something that turns residents into violently aggressive zombie-like creatures. Police and military cordon off the block almost immediately. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. The whole thing unfolds in real time across roughly 78 minutes, and in that window, the building goes from a normal residential block to a complete slaughterhouse. Here's where it gets dark. The origin traces back to a girl named Tristana Medeiros, who was infected during a Vatican exorcism experiment. Let me say that again. A Vatican exorcism experiment. Whatever they were doing mutated from something spiritual into something biological, a contagion that spreads through contact and turns people into feral killing machines. The case fatality rate among the building's micropopulation hits effectively 100%. Every family, every firefighter, every person trapped inside those walls either dies or turns. And the whole time, authorities on the outside think they have it under control. They've drawn their perimeter, they've sealed the doors, problem solved, right? But REC is actually the optimistic version of Level 1. The authorities respond, the quarantine holds, the infection stays in the box. Now compare that with the opening scene of 28 Days Later, which shows you what happens when the box doesn't hold. A group of animal rights activists breaks into a research facility in Cambridge and finds chimpanzees strapped to chairs, forced to watch screens of human violence. The chimps are infected with something called the rage virus, an experimental pathogen that causes uncontrollable aggression within seconds of exposure. A scientist catches them and begs them not to open the cages. He tells them the chimps are infected. He tells them it's contagious through blood and saliva. He is extremely clear about this. They open the cages anyway. The first chimp bites an activist, and within about 10 seconds, she's vomiting blood and attacking her friends. That's it. That's the entire incubation period, 10 seconds. The virus escapes the lab in under a minute, and 4 weeks later, mainland Britain is a wasteland of screaming, blood-soaked infected running through empty cities. 28 days. All of it. Every death, every collapsed hospital, every abandoned street traces back to one room and one opened cage. And this is the most chilling truth about Level 1. If those activists had turned around and walked out of that facility without touching a single latch, Britain's entire devastation never happens. The rage virus stays in the lab. The chimps stay in their cages. The world keeps turning. Containment at this stage isn't about armies or vaccines or emergency broadcasts. It's about whether one person makes one correct decision in one moment. Fans still debate whether the activists are villains or just naive idealists who stumbled into a catastrophic systems failure. Some argue the real villain is whoever designed a biosafety facility that a handful of civilians could break into with what appears to be zero difficulty. Fair point, honestly. But the result is the same either way. One room, one mistake, an entire country erased. That's Level 1. It looks small, it looks manageable. And if you're watching from the outside, you might even think it's already over. But if you think a single building is bad, wait until an entire town goes dark. Level 2, small town infestation. Here's the thing about Level 1. It's scary, sure, but at least you can see the walls. You know where the threat is. You can point at a door and say the bad stuff is on the other side of that. Level 2 doesn't give you that luxury, because at Level 2, the infection isn't trapped in a building anymore. It's in your water. This is the stage where an entire community gets swallowed. We're talking populations in the low thousands, small towns where everybody knows everybody, where the sheriff coaches Little League and the diner closes at 8. Everyday life completely collapses for the locals. But here's the cruel part. The rest of the world is still functioning. State and national structures are intact enough to observe what's happening, quarantine the area, or if they decide it's too far gone, erase it entirely. The textbook example here is Ogden Marsh from The Crazies. Ogden Marsh is this tiny farming community in Pierce County, Iowa. Classic Midwest. Cornfields, church on Sunday, everybody waves at each other from their trucks. And then a government plane carrying a military bioweapon called Trixie crashes and contaminates the town's water supply. Not a river or a lake that people might avoid. The municipal water supply. The stuff coming out of every faucet, every showerhead, every glass of water poured at dinner. Residents start drinking Trixie before anyone even knows there's a problem. That's the part that makes level 2 genuinely horrifying. There's no dramatic patient zero moment. No screaming victims stumbling into a hospital. People just go about their mornings, brush their teeth, make coffee, fill up their kid's water bottle for school, and they're already infected. By the time the first person starts acting violent, dozens or hundreds of others have already consumed the same contaminated water. You can't trace it, you can't isolate it. It's systemic and invisible. The infected don't become zombies in the traditional sense. They become crazies, homicidal and erratic, losing impulse control and rational thought while still looking mostly human. Your neighbor walks over with a pitchfork and you genuinely can't tell if he's lost his mind or if he's just having a rough Tuesday. And because it's a small town, the medical infrastructure to identify and contain something like this basically doesn't exist. One clinic, maybe 2 doctors, 0 virologists. By the time anyone figures out what's happening, the community is functionally destroyed. The US military shows up, sets up triage centers and barriers, and then does what militaries in zombie fiction always seem to do at level 2. They do the math. One small town versus the entire state of Iowa. One community versus millions of people. And the answer they arrive at is obliterate Ogden Marsh. Wipe it off the map. Even as uninfected residents are trying to escape, trying to prove they're still healthy, the decision has already been made. Your town is now a containment problem, not a rescue mission. That's the ethical horror of level 2. It's not just the infected coming after you. It's your own government deciding you're expendable. Now, fans love to argue that small towns would actually fare better than cities in an outbreak. Rural firepower, self-reliance, tight-knit communities that can organize quickly. And on paper, sure, that sounds reasonable. But fiction keeps undermining this fantasy for a very specific reason. Small towns have fewer hospitals, fewer escape routes, slower information networks, and when your water supply is the attack vector, your shotgun collection is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. You can't shoot contaminated groundwater. Train to Busan shows the other side of level 2, the moment right before it stops being level 2. In the earliest phase of South Korea's outbreak, dozens of bite victims are rushed to hospitals in Seoul. Medical facilities are overwhelmed within minutes, not hours, minutes. Staff get attacked, patients turn, and suddenly an entire hospital wing is gone. At this point, the chaos is still district level, still technically containable, still something a government could theoretically draw a line around, but within 24 hours, it spirals completely beyond control. That transition is what makes level 2 so terrifying in hindsight. It's the last stage where containment is theoretically possible. The boundary between we can handle this and we've lost the city is paper thin, and once you cross it, there's no going back. But if you think losing a single town is bad, wait until an entire city goes dark. Level 3, citywide crisis. Here's where zombie outbreaks stop being something you read about in a news ticker and start being something that swallows you whole. Because level 3 isn't just more zombies in a bigger place. It's the moment when every system designed to keep a city alive becomes the thing that kills it. Sewers, water pipes, hospitals, bridges, all of it turns against the population. And nobody illustrates this better than Raccoon City, which is probably the most meticulously documented citywide zombie crisis in all of fiction. Let me walk you through exactly how fast it fell. On September 22, 1998, Umbrella's private military unit, the USS, raids the underground Nest laboratory to seize the G-virus from William Birkin. The operation goes sideways. T-virus samples break during the firefight and contaminate the sewer system. Now, normally, a sewer contamination is already bad, but here's the thing about Raccoon City's infrastructure. The sewer system connects directly to the city's water supply. Every building, every street, every faucet. Rats carry the virus from those tunnels into the general water infrastructure, and suddenly you don't need to be bitten to get infected. You just need to drink water, which is, not ideal. By September 26th, things are deteriorating fast, but there's still a window. If you packed your car and drove out of the city before this date, your survival odds sat somewhere around 70 to 80%. Not great, but workable. The problem is that most people didn't leave. They waited for instructions. They trusted the system. By the time formal evacuation orders go out, those odds have already cratered to 30 to 40%. Mass panic, clogged roads, infected civilians mixed in with healthy ones. And once the bridges close, specifically Raven's Gate Bridge, the city becomes a cage. Anyone still inside after that point has roughly a 5% chance of making it out alive. 5%. That's not a survival rate, that's a rounding error away from zero. By September 28th, approximately 90% of Raccoon City's population is infected. 6 days. That's all it took to go from a lab accident in a basement to a near-total zombie zone. 6 days from broken vials to a dead city. On October 1st, the US government launches a thermonuclear missile and wipes Raccoon City off the map entirely. 9 days, start to finish. Lab breach to mushroom cloud. And the terrifying part isn't the nuke. It's how fast everything between those two events happened. Because the city's own infrastructure acted as a force multiplier for the virus. The water system didn't fail. It worked perfectly. It delivered contaminated water to every home and business in the city with brutal efficiency. The bridges didn't collapse. They functioned exactly as designed, which meant the moment authorities closed them, they trapped tens of thousands of people inside with the infected. The very things that make a modern city livable became a delivery system for extinction. Now, contrast that 9-day timeline with Train to Busan, which shows the same level 3 dynamic playing out in Seoul, but compressed into a single day. One infected woman boards a train. Hospitals in Seoul are overwhelmed within minutes, as bite victims flood emergency rooms and then turn on the staff treating them. Within hours, the South Korean government collapses entirely. By the end of that day, the United States, NATO, and the United Nations are quarantining the entire country. 1 day? Not 9, 1. The difference comes down to 2 variables: population density and virus speed. Raccoon City was a mid-sized urban center with a slower burn pathogen that spread through infrastructure over days. Seoul is one of the most densely packed cities on Earth, with a virus that turns victims in seconds. Same level 3 dynamics, wildly different timescales. But the outcome is identical: total systemic collapse. Fan debates still rage over whether Raccoon City's nuclear destruction was legitimate containment or a convenient cover-up for Umbrella Corporation. Because here's the uncomfortable question. If 90% of the population was already infected by September 28th, was the nuke saving anyone? Or was it erasing evidence? Some players argue that the US government had no choice, that a city with that infection rate is an uncontainable biohazard that could leak into surrounding regions at any moment. Others point out that Umbrella had significant political influence and that vaporizing the entire city also conveniently destroyed every piece of physical evidence linking the corporation to the outbreak. Either way, the lesson of level 3 is brutally simple. A city isn't just a collection of buildings and people, it's a network. And when a pathogen enters that network, every pipe, every road, every bridge becomes a weapon. The infrastructure doesn't protect you, it infects you. But if you think a single city collapsing sounds bad, wait until that infection crosses state lines and an entire region gets written off the map. Level 4, regional outbreak. Here's where the math stops being about people and starts being about geography. Level 4 is the moment infection leaps beyond individual cities, beyond counties and provinces, and swallows entire regions whole. We're talking multiple states, entire countries, thousands of miles of territory where the living are no longer the dominant species. And the most terrifying part isn't what's happening inside the infected zone, it's what's happening outside it. Because at level 4, the rest of the world makes a decision, and that decision is to lock the door and walk away. The Rage virus gives us the clearest picture of what this looks like in practice. In 28 days later, a pathogen that started with animal rights activists breaking into a Cambridge research lab and freeing infected chimpanzees transforms the entirety of mainland Great Britain into a dead zone in just 28 days. 28 days. That's less time than most people spend deciding on a new couch. And in that window, an entire nation of over 60 million people is effectively erased from the map, but the infection itself isn't the part that haunts me. It's the response. By the time 28 weeks later picks up, NATO has established a full military quarantine around the British Isles. And the implications of that quarantine carry exactly the weight you think they do. No unauthorized travel, no unscreened refugees, no exceptions. The entirety of Great Britain is cordoned off, treated not as a nation but as a containment perimeter, with American-led NATO forces controlling all access in and out, every boat monitored, every aircraft accounted for. Every person still breathing inside those borders during the outbreak was, from the outside world's perspective, already gone. Think about that for a second. At level 3, you've got governments scrambling to save cities, launching evacuations, deploying the National Guard. There's chaos, sure, but there's also effort. People are trying. Level 4 is the opposite energy entirely. Level 4 is clinical, distant, cold. It's a room full of military commanders drawing a line on a map and saying everything on this side is no longer our problem. Entire populations written off as containment sacrifices to prevent intercontinental spread. South Korea in Train to Busan operates on the same principle, just compressed into a nightmarish timeline. Over the course of a single day, the zombie outbreak overwhelmed overwhelms city after city, with the military losing control of Busan, the last major holdout. The government declares martial law, quarantine zones collapse as fast as they're established, and by the film's end, the surviving characters are walking toward a military blockade that has orders to shoot anything moving on the wrong side of the line. Yesterday, South Korea was one of the most technologically advanced nations on the planet. By sundown, its own military is treating survivors and infected as the same category of threat. That's the kind of whiplash that Level 4 specializes in. The most chilling detail in both scenarios is how borders transform. Lines that existed for cooperation, for commerce, for cultural exchange, suddenly become fortifications against biological catastrophe. Every checkpoint, every port, every bridge becomes a wall, and the people on the wrong side of that wall, they don't get a vote. Fan debates around Level 4 tend to center on one question: is total quarantine morally defensible? Some argue it's the only rational response to something as fast and aggressive as the rage virus. You can't evacuate 60 million people without letting infected individuals slip through, and a single carrier reaching Paris or Berlin turns Level 4 into Level 5 overnight. Others see it as an act of mass abandonment, a calculation that says British lives are worth less than continental European ones because of geography and timing. There's no clean answer. That's kind of the point. And here's where it gets really unsettling. The quarantine doesn't hold. And 28 weeks later, the rage virus breaches containment and reaches continental Europe. The final scene of the film shows infected sprinting through the streets of Paris, pouring out of a tunnel exit near the Eiffel Tower. The most heavily militarized quarantine operation in the franchise's history, NATO forces, shoot on-site protocols, total border lockdown, and it still wasn't enough. Nobody knows exactly how it crossed the channel. A carrier who slipped through screening? A flaw in the repopulation program that restarted too early? The franchise never gives a definitive answer, which is somehow worse than any explanation would be. Because if a full military quarantine, the most extreme containment measure imaginable, can still fail, then what exactly is stopping Level 4 from becoming something much, much worse? Turns out, maybe nothing. Because when quarantine lines start failing at the regional level, the infection doesn't politely stop at the next border. Level 5, continental devastation. Up until now, every outbreak we've covered had a border, a building, a city, a country, something you could draw a line around on a map and say the infection is here, and it is not there. Level 5 is where that line disappears. Continental devastation is what happens when regional quarantines fail simultaneously. Cargo flights move infected passengers between international hubs before anyone thinks to ground them. Container ships drift into ports with nothing but dead crews aboard, carrying the pathogen to entirely new landmasses overnight. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the infection isn't in one country anymore. It's everywhere on the continent, and then the next one, and then the next one. But here's where this level really hits different from everything before it. It's not the concept that gets you, it's the numbers. Let's start with World War Z. The novel uses an oral history structure, pulling together survivor interviews from China, the United States, South Africa, and dozens of other regions to paint a picture of what continental ruin actually looks like from the ground. Every continent gets its own chapter of horror. Nobody is spared. No government is clever enough, no military is strong enough, no border is thick enough. The zombie war rolls across land masses the way weather does. You can see it coming, but you cannot stop it. And the death toll reflects that. In the film adaptation, a UN survey puts the number at approximately 4.9 billion dead. Out of a global pre-war population of around 7 billion, that's roughly 70% of every human being on the planet, just gone. Distributed across Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Not concentrated in one unlucky region. Spread everywhere, like a tax nobody voted for. But World War Z gives you continental devastation through stories, through voices, through qualitative horror. I Am Legend gives it to you through math. And the math is somehow worse. The Crippen virus started as a genetically modified measles virus, designed to cure cancer, which is not ideal. KV had a 90% kill rate. Out of 6 billion people alive in 2009, approximately 5.4 billion die. That number alone is staggering, but what makes it truly nightmarish is what happens to the survivors. Of the remaining 10%, 9%, roughly 588 million people, become Darkseekers, nocturnal, aggressive, zombie vampire hybrids that hunt in packs, and occupy every major population center on Earth. Only 1% of humanity, about 60 million people, are actually immune. Let me put that in perspective. 60 million survivors scattered across the entire planet. That's fewer people than the population of a single country like Italy or South Korea. Now spread them across every continent on Earth. You could walk for days, weeks, through what used to be major cities, and never encounter another living human being. Just dark seekers, just empty buildings, just silence. KV, attacks spread faster than any other phenomenon in human history. Within 3 years, virtually all modern societies had ceased to function. Continents didn't just lose their governments, they lost their populations. Cities became hollow shells. Infrastructure rotted. The world Robert Neville wanders through in Manhattan isn't a city anymore. It's a museum exhibit of what cities used to be, maintained by nobody, visited by nothing except deer and the occasional pack of mutants. And that contrast between the two franchises is what makes Level 5 so effective as a concept. World War Z shows you continental devastation through human testimony. You hear a Chinese doctor describe the first cases. You hear an American soldier talk about the Battle of Yonkers. Each account adds another layer of dread because you realize every continent has its own version of the same nightmare. I Am Legend skips the testimony entirely and just hands you a calculator. 90% dead, 9% monsters, 1% immune. Do the math yourself. Both approaches are devastating, just in completely different ways. Now, fans debate whether any pathogen could realistically kill 90% of humanity, and honestly, it's a fair question. But history has an uncomfortable answer. The Black Death killed somewhere between 30% and 60% of Europe's population in the 14th century, and that was without air travel, without global supply chains, without the kind of interconnected infrastructure that lets a virus hop continents in hours. Under conditions of total social breakdown, where hospitals are overrun, supply chains collapse, and secondary infections run rampant, extremely high mortality rates aren't science fiction. They're just science fiction happening faster. A common misconception about this level is that continental devastation automatically means extinction. It doesn't. Both World War Z and I Am Legend make a point of showing that survivors persist. They're scattered. They're isolated. They're rebuilding in safe zones and remote communities and fortified enclaves, but they exist. Humanity at Level 5 isn't dead. It's just been reduced to a rounding error on its own population chart, which is horrifying enough, but at least at Level 5, some continents might still have functional safe zones. Some regions might hold. At Level 6, even that small comfort vanishes entirely. Level 6, Global Pandemic. Every zombie virus we've talked about so far spreads the same basic way. You get bitten, you get infected, you turn. Brutal. It's fast, and it's terrifying, but it follows rules you can understand. You can see the threat coming. You can, at least in theory, avoid it. The wildfire virus from The Walking Dead threw those rules in the garbage. On August 25th, 2010, wildfire was officially declared a global pandemic, and within weeks, it caused the complete and total collapse of modern civilization. Every national government dissolved. No central authority. No federal response. No international aid. The military didn't disappear overnight, but it fragmented into regional forces and warlord groups that controlled territory in exchange for food and loyalty. The world as anyone knew it simply stopped existing. But here's the thing, the bite isn't what makes wildfire so catastrophic. The bite is just the loud part, the part that gets all the attention. What makes wildfire the single most terrifying fictional pathogen ever created is something most casual viewers of The Walking Dead don't fully understand until someone spells it out for them. Wildfire operates in two phases, and the first phase is the one that ended the world before anyone even knew it started. Phase 1 is an airborne, completely dormant infection. It doesn't make you sick. It doesn't give you a fever. It doesn't do anything. It just silently spreads through the atmosphere, enters your bloodstream and neural tissue, and sits there, waiting. Every single person on the planet breathed it in. Every man, woman, and child on Earth was already infected before the first walker ever appeared on screen. You, me, everyone. Already carrying it. Already a zombie waiting to happen. And that's not a metaphor. That's canon. Because once you have Phase 1 in your system, any death from any cause results in reanimation. Heart attack, you come back. Car crash, you come back. Old age, you come back. Get shot by your best friend because he thought you were a threat? Congratulations, you're still coming back. The dormant infection guarantees it. There is no scenario in which a dead human stays dead, which means even if you somehow eliminated every single active walker on the planet, even if you stopped every bite, every scratch, every point of direct transmission, it wouldn't matter. People still die, and every death creates a new walker. The reservoir is permanent. It can never be emptied. That's the part that breaks your brain if you really sit with it. Every single emotional death in The Walking Dead, every character who died from something other than a bite, they were always going to turn. The virus was already inside them from the beginning. The show just didn't tell you that for the first season and a half. Phase 2 is the more traditional route. This is the active agent transmitted through bites and scratches, and it's what kills you fast. When a walker sinks its teeth into you, the active negative viral load triggers something called necroepsis, which is essentially a full-body shutdown, cytokine storm, organ failure, death within 8 to 48 hours depending on the severity of the wound. And once you're dead, phase 1 kicks in and reanimates the body. No cure exists. Even with advanced medical intervention, once necroepsis begins, it's over. You are going to die, and you are going to come back. This two-phase mechanism is what separates wildfire from every other zombie pathogen in fiction. Most viruses need a transmission event. Wildfire already won before transmission even mattered, and wildfire isn't the only pathogen that qualifies for level 6. The Crippen virus from I Am Legend had a 90% kill rate, wiping out 5.4 billion people and collapsing every modern society on the planet within 3 years. Of the survivors, 588 million became Darkseekers, and roughly 60 million remained immune, which is not exactly a thriving civilization. World War Z's zombie war similarly destroyed international order for years, with an estimated 4.9 billion dead and entire continents effectively depopulated. Both qualify as full global pandemic events where no functioning government or coordinated human response remains. Now, fan speculation around wildfire gets interesting. A popular theory suggests the virus may be man-made, possibly originating from a French laboratory where it was designed as a viral vector or retrovirus meant to treat disease. The idea is that it mutated catastrophically, escaped containment, and the airborne dormant phase spread globally before anyone realized what they were dealing with. The show never confirms this outright, but it never shuts the door on it either, which is exactly the kind of ambiguity that keeps fan forums arguing at 3 a.m. There are also rare anomalies that complicate the picture. Alicia Clark reportedly survived necroepsis, which should be impossible based on everything the canon establishes. This has led to speculation about possible natural immunity in certain individuals, but the show treats this as an extraordinary exception, not evidence of a broader cure. One person surviving a disease that killed billions doesn't rewrite the rules. It just means the rules have a footnote. At level 6, there's nothing left to save. No government is coming. No vaccine is being developed. No military is coordinating a response. The entire concept of help has ceased to exist. You're not fighting to restore civilization. You're fighting to not die today. And even if you win that fight, you're still carrying the thing that guarantees you'll become the enemy the moment you lose it. But if level 6 is the end of civilization, level 7 is the end of something much bigger. The end of us. Level 7, extinction event. At every other level, humans are fighting to survive. At level 7, that fight is over, and the humans lost. This is the end game. Not collapse, not crisis, not even apocalypse. Extinction. Governments don't exist anymore because there's nobody left to govern. Economies are meaningless because there's nobody left to trade. Communication systems are dead because there's nobody left to talk to. The world hasn't ended, though. It's just continuing without us. And you can see it happening in the landscapes these stories paint. Vines crawl up the sides of skyscrapers that nobody will ever enter again. Rivers break through highways that nobody will ever drive on. Forests swallow entire suburbs, consuming houses that families once argued about mortgage payments on. Cities become skeletons of concrete and rust, monuments to a species that thought it was permanent. Here's the thing about level 7 that separates it from everything below it. At every previous level, humans are still the main characters of Earth's story. We're struggling, we're dying, but we're still the dominant species fighting to maintain our position. At level 7, that's no longer true. Humans are a footnote, a relic. The undead roam territories that belong to people, and nobody is coming to take them back. The Crippen pandemic from I Am Legend is the closest any major franchise gets to depicting true extinction. The numbers are brutal. Out of 6 billion people on Earth, 5.4 billion die. That's a 90% kill rate. Of the remaining 600 million, the vast majority, around 588 million, become Darkseekers, nocturnal, aggressive creatures that are no longer fully human in behavior or biology. And the immune? Just 12 million people worldwide. That's it. Robert Neville exists as possibly the last human in New York City and potentially one of the very few in the entire continental United States. Large swaths of the planet have 0 remaining uninfected humans. Not very few. 0. The cities belong to Darkseekers now. They roam freely through streets, buildings, and parks that were designed for people, occupying the ecological niche that Homo sapiens held for thousands of years. And those 12 million immune survivors scattered across the globe, their ability to find each other, reproduce, and rebuild is genuinely uncertain. No communications, no infrastructure, no supply chains, just tiny clusters of people hiding in a world that has moved on without them. World War Z's 4.9 billion dead nudges toward extinction conditions too, and some regions have effectively lost all surviving humans, creating localized extinction zones. But here's where I need to correct a common misconception. World War Z's death toll is staggering? Absolutely. But hundreds of millions of people still live. Organized reclamation efforts exist. Governments, however fractured, fractured, are attempting to rebuild. That places World War Z more accurately at level 6 rather than true level 7. A global pandemic with survivors fighting back is not the same thing as extinction. The distinction matters. Genuine level 7 events are the rarest and most interpretive category in zombie fiction. Almost nothing fully commits to it, because once humanity is truly gone, there's nobody left to tell the story. But here's where it gets genuinely philosophical. And I promise this isn't just me being pretentious. The fan debate around I Am Legend centers on one devastating question. Are Darkseekers still human? Think about it. 588 million of them exist. They have social structures. They communicate. They protect each other. They fear and hate. Robert Neville. If you argue that Darkseekers represent a speciation event, a biological transformation so complete that they constitute a new species, then something fascinating has happened. Humanity has simultaneously gone extinct and evolved into something new. The species didn't just die. It changed. The baton was passed, violently and without consent, but passed nonetheless. Some fans argue this means humanity didn't really go extinct at all, just transformed. Others counter that if the resulting creatures don't retain human consciousness, memory, culture, or values, then the thing that made us is absolutely dead, regardless of what shambles around in our bodies afterward. I don't know what to tell you. There's no clean answer. And that's what Level 7 really does to zombie fiction. It pushes the genre beyond horror, beyond survival thriller, beyond action. It becomes speculative evolution, a contemplation of a future where humans are either a minor remnant clinging to existence or fully vanished, and the planet just keeps spinning. The sun rises over empty cities. Animals reclaim territory. Weather erodes buildings that took decades to construct, and nobody notices, because there's nobody left to notice. Consider the full scope of what we've covered. Level 1 is a single apartment building in Barcelona. Level 7 is an empty planet, from one room to the entire Earth, from a handful of people trapped with something horrible to a species erased from the face of its own world. That's the complete arc of zombie fiction's darkest imagination, and every level between is just the slow, horrible process of getting from one to the other. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.